Welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. I'm an advisor, author, and general explorer of the service and experience space. My guests tend to have just released some interesting research. They run a company that has some interesting tech in the service and experience space. They are part of an organization that is doing some cool stuff, or they run their own business doing interesting things for both their customers and or their employees. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have, one of the longest friends of the podcast, I think, ever. Now, this podcast has been going since January 2011. And with me today, I have Carey Smith, who is the founding contrarian, great title, at Unorthodox Ventures and former founder and CEO, also known as the chief big ass of Big Ass Fans. Carey, we spoke together back in 2014, so long time no see, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Adrian.
So, as I say, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail before we dive into it? I mean, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch on Carey Smith?
What a question! The thing I really don't like to talk about is that guy, Carey Smith.
Okay.
Because it's kind of, everything you read, you're reading about, especially if it's business press, you're reading about how much these guys seem to like themselves. And they spend a lot of time trying to make sure that they're in the public eye and they're doing what they should be doing. And I always think about Elon. He does it all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess he's a master at it. If that's the goal, I honestly, when I'm not a big Twitter, I'm not a user, but I do look at it, and I'm just about to the point where I'm not going to do it anymore because it's such a load of trash. But anyway, Elon's on it all the time. I mean, that boy, this is like his personal advertising link to the world, and it drives me crazy. I flip right past it, and it's not because I dislike him or I think I appreciate him, and I think he's done a wonderful job, though he does. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to go into that, but I don't you don't naturally dislike him. He seems like he'd be a nice enough guy, but Jiminy Cricket, he spends a lot of time on Elon, which I find. My mother used to tell me when I did something that I thought was interesting, she would always say, "You're not that special," and that's kind of the way. And she was a nice mother. That sounds terrible, I guess, but don't take it that way. But all the point was, okay, calm down. I mean, get on with it. You're not that special.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll say. The thumbnail sketch, then we can keep it as, actually, while Carey doesn't think he's that special, actually he's done some special kind of stuff. And what I wanted to do on the podcast was to revisit some of the things that you've done in the past, just to kind of update people, but also kind of talk about kind of some of the stuff that you've kind of been doing subsequently. Because the last time we spoke, as I said before, was that we spoke back in 2014. And I've always loved the story that you told me about how your customer service strategy was central to the phenomenal growth that you experienced between 2009 and through to 2014. So for the benefit of people not wanting to dig through the archives and things,
right?
Can you catch us up and tell us what you did with with actually a big shout out to Dave Waltz, who was kind of on the podcast with you at the time.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that the focus over the entire lifetime of the company was customer service. And again, a lot of this, or I guess all of it, was basically organic. And over a period of time, we changed the way we approached customer service, and we refined it. And it's the sort of thing that it takes a while to figure out what's a good way and what makes some sense. And when we spoke, and Dave was with us, we had refined it, I think, to the point where we saw it as being important enough to actually have, to actually be very proactive about it. Because I think that a lot of this, and again, going back to a lot of people that we talked to today, if somebody called them up and actually got a hold of the entrepreneur and said, "I'm dissatisfied," well, I think that would upset them. It would upset anybody, of course, but they would respond to that. And so sometimes people will say, "Well, I do have customer service. When people have a problem, I take care of it." But the way we looked at it was that we want to be very proactive about it, because a lot of people, they just don't say. If you go out to a restaurant, I'm always very vocal. My wife hates this, but I feel like I owe it to the restaurant to tell them to critique their whatever's going. And maybe that's, maybe I'm just a old smudge, but I think that's useful. And I think that what we moved to, and especially with Dave, was that we were proactively calling people and asking them, tell us about the experience, and don't bother telling us. We appreciate the fact that you like the product, that that's fine, but what we really want to concentrate on is, what could we do better? What did we do wrong? And it doesn't matter how small that problem is, because it gives us something to work on and to make better. And so it may be a small problem to you, for example, how the bolts or all of the hardware is packaged, or where it's packaged. And that may bother you a little bit, but maybe not. You get by with it. Mm-hmm. But if you know that this had been a 10 experience rather than a 9, then tell us that. That's what we want to know, and that's what we poked and poked and poked, and that's what we always tried to find. And I think I see a lot of the other side of this even today. I travel a little bit, and I use Clear, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's a service that basically vets the customer, the airline customer, prior to giving them the ability to get on the airplane faster, to circumvent lines,
right,
or the TSA in our and I think that's a wonderful service. I think they've done a great job, but they always, like most of these companies, they start out and say, would you suggest our service to others? And I always say, yes, of course. I get the feeling, though, honestly, and then it goes on to the next stage, the next page and so on. Mm-hmm. But I get the feeling, I haven't tried this, I probably should, but if I answered, no, I hate it, I would never do that, I have a feeling that that's the end of the survey. That's where it stops, because, if you're going to say something nasty, we really don't want to hear that. Mm-hmm. And that's all wrong. And so I think that it's a proactive approach to this. Mm-hmm. That's what's important. And that's what we, again, by the time that you and I and Dave talked, we had, and I'm not saying that we didn't improve upon that, but it had reached a stage where we were very, very proactive. Yeah. And I think that makes a big difference, because we were proactive with the people that work for us as well. Everybody's got to, I think, transparency is a big deal, and you've got to tell people what you think, and they have to be able or willing to tell you what they think, and that just makes everything better. It simplifies life.
Yeah. No, I love that story, and it's a story that I've been telling kind of people, to this day. I was only a couple of weeks ago, I was at an event where I was telling a few stories to people, and one of the stories that I told was the story of yourselves. because even now, even that it's nearly, well, it's 9 years on, even now, people are, you'd think that some of these things would land, but almost they're moving further and further away from it. Everything's getting digitized and automated and kind of like at arm's length and stuff. But I'm saying that sometimes the fundamental things of just leaning into it and actually using your own time and effort to actually kind of step forward towards people, that can be the thing that makes the difference. And so, first of all, I want to say thank you for sharing that story and your story kind of with me, because I think I've used it countless times. And even now, that people are still inspired and fired up and hopefully moved by that, by the story. I hope it kind of encourages them to do their own sort of reaching out to, to people. And so, yeah, no, it's kind of great, because I think it's just a great example. So, but can you tell me what happened subsequent to 2014? Because now you've moved on to a new thing. I mean, kind of what happened in the interim between then and now?
Well, 2014, I stayed at the company. We sold the company in 2017.
Okay.
And so we were just doing our thing, but until 2017. And 2017, I sold the company, the end of almost the last day of 2017. And so since that time, we have started another company. And the people that came with me, because we sold our company to a PE firm, and a PE firm typically is not, I mean, they're financial engineers. They're not mechanical or electrical engineers. And I had a team that was focused on developing new products, on examining different sectors that we might be interested in, just that sort of thing. And it was a bunch of engineers, really. And the PE firm told me, well, we don't need those people because they're PE guys, because they know everything, but they apparently don't know that much about mechanical engineering. I know this is surprising: mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, any engineer.
They're good at spreadsheets.
Oh yeah, that is it. That's all there is. And so it was a bunch of young guys and gals, and I said, let's go do something else, and I'll pay for it until we close everything down. We figure out what's going on, and that's what we did. And the consensus was that we should get into investing, that we should get into what we thought at the time was venture capital. And because it sounded interesting, it sounded, you do a lot of different things, we could learn a lot. We had not only engineers, we had supply chain people, we had the whole gamut. They ran the gamut, these guys and gals. And so that's what we did. And again, just like it's like anything. I swear to God, I don't know why I have to learn everything. Like I guess I'm not I know I'm not a really good networking type of guy, but it seems like when I start something, I start from scratch, and then it develops. And I don't really think that's commendable. I really don't. I mean, there are better ways of doing things, but unfortunately, that's the way if I don't work on it, that's the way I have to think about it, or do think about it. So anyway, it's taken us a couple of years to get it to the point it is, and now we invest, I think, much more intelligently than we did in the beginning, and we focused a lot of what we do on medical devices and med tech. We do other things, but what we've learned is it's not just the product. I know this sounds silly, and people are going to go, well, yeah, dumb, you should have figured this one out right off the bat. But I always figured, well, if it was a good product, I mean, geez, anybody can do this. But that's not the case. And what makes the biggest difference are the individuals that are actually running or trying to develop company, the entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in the main, and this may be just the way it is, because I'm always trying to think, well, okay, if I was given advice, would I have changed? Would I have, cut a corner? Would I have been able to do what I did faster? Because it took me almost 20 years. And I think that if I'd had enough sense, I hopefully would have listened. But a lot of these, the typical entrepreneur, I think, and I sympathize with this. I mean, you've got your vision. You think, oh my God, I'm the only one that sees over the horizon. This clown did whatever he did, but it's not what I'm doing. And so it's very difficult. What we've learned is very, very difficult to actually engage people doing this, starting their own businesses, running, or even this is even after the first funding and second funding. Once you get past that, it sort of thins out, because if you're in your B round, they kind of have to know what the heck's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them still don't. But that's very, very difficult. And that's the one thing that I find upsetting about this, is you can do something and you can have a story to tell. And I think you can, basically I can, and again, this is difficult. Your IQ in essence is, I can increase, or anybody can increase their IQ in essence by knowing. It took me 10 years to know this, to learn this. If I can teach it to you in a shorter period of time and you use it, I've boosted your IQ. Then your IQ is higher than mine, and that's a good thing, and that's what you want. You want to help people, but that's very, very hard, very, very hard, and it takes a lot of time. So I think that when we thought initially about VC, I guess I kind of thought about it that way. I didn't think it was going to be as hard actually getting through to people. I had just assumed that they would take the advice and use it, but that's not the case often. And these guys, and we always refer to it as touching the stove. And because if you've had kids, they're going to touch the stove,
Mm-hmm.
and because they're dying to touch the stove. And so these guys and gals, oftentimes, we say, well, they've got to see it. They've got to touch the stove. They've got to get hurt, or they're never going to learn this. That's, I think, the most interesting piece of what we do. It's not interesting. It's not intellectually challenging doing that from my perspective, from our perspective. But because what's intellectually challenging and what makes what we do, which is kind of VC, is learn an awful lot about things you know nothing about. It's like being in the library. It's like being in the stacks. You learn a lot. There's a lot to be learned. It's fascinating, but it's a little rough. It doesn't get any easier. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bit like I remember talking to somebody yesterday, actually. And I think it's the same for people that are, if you like, technical experts in their field. And the person I was talking to was speaking to them specifically was they were in the legal profession. And, they measure their worth by how much they know about the law and everything else. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is that most other people don't know anything about the law, and so they don't know how smart they are, and sometimes they'll measure how smart they are by how they are with them. And that's one of the fascinating things to your kind of point, is almost a bit like, it's a pretty straightforward to understand how we can build our knowledge or build our IQ about things, but actually there's some of the things we find the hardest things to do is the things that require us kind of like behaviorally to change. Those new habits, which requires us to go out and do things outside of our comfort zone type of things. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is like how some founders get kind of so laser focused on the thing, the limited thing that they do. They don't necessarily think about that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a world, and you've got to actually understand how it fits in that world. And that requires going out and doing kind of new and different things, which might require you to ask questions, to your point around your experience around big ass fans, and to be vulnerable and to take criticism and do all these different things.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's the taking the criticism, which a lot of people always tell people when we sit down to talk. I say, look, I'm very transparent. This means this is not personal. I'm just thinking business, because I don't know you as an individual. I surely can't judge you. But I can look at the business and I can tell you what I think. It doesn't mean it's right, but it means that, and I'm surrounded by a number of smart people, that engineers, sales channel people, distribution people, that when we say it, we're just responding to the business. This is the way it looks, and it may not be the way you're doing it, which means that you should think about this. There's a better way, and we can help you get there. I mean, I think normally people do avail themselves of that, but again, they have to touch the stove. They almost have to listen to it and go, okay, and then they go out and continue to try to get a product made in China or get Chinese engineering, and you go, don't do those things. This is what's going to happen to you. This is the problem. You're not going to own your engineering. You're not going to be able to get your engineering. You're not going to be able to do any derivations on your engineering, because you don't own it. And the same thing is true with, you sell through Amazon, you don't get the customer feedback. You don't understand what Amazon's looking at this, the way they look at things. What's good for Amazon it's never good for you, or it almost never is good for you, because Amazon is simply consolidating a lot of products, and that's what makes them successful. But you've only got your one product or two products. It doesn't mean that you're going to be successful, and typically not. But so they have to do it. And then I think the big thing after that is recognizing, okay, and it's not like we need to hear this, because I don't need to hear it. I know the guys and gals don't need to hear it. But okay, so you were right, and so I shouldn't do that. Now, how do I get myself out of this? And that's a lot of this. And honestly, that's the part of it that's the really, really hard part. And you try to keep people, you say, look, if you listen and think about it, you can avoid this problem. And when you hit that problem, you're going to have to stop. You're going to have to stop. You're going to have to rethink it, and you're going to have to take 2 steps back. And that's not what you want to do, but that's the way you solve these problems.
And so, I mean, so when you're working with kind of like founders, I mean, because I think this is an illustrative thing for not just people that are founders or entrepreneurs, but also people that are leading initiatives where they're trying to kind of improve something or make things kind of better. But let's focus on founders to start with. I mean, it's like, what would you like to see founders do kind of more of, typically in your experience, which is going to help them on their journey, whether it's with yourselves or anywhere else, right? Because you will have experienced some people, you've been on that journey with them, you'll have encouraged them to do different sort of like kind of things. But what are the things that you at a meta level would say, I think you'd be well served if you did more of this?
2 things. One is product research, is market research, product research. You have to know what the market is. You have to, and don't look for, I've got a solution, I know how to do this one thing, now I'm going to try to apply it to something. Go out and try and understand what the problem is, because And again, I think that one of the reasons that medical devices for us are easier is because a lot of it comes from, the OR, and these people do these things over and over, and they go, there's a better way to do this. I could do this. Either I could save money doing it. There's a more time efficient way to do it. There is a way to do it so that I can make sure that the patient doesn't have to come back to the hospital, which is very expensive, coming back to the hospital. Let's do it right the first time. We've got a cancer. Let's make sure that we get the boundaries, that we understand where the boundaries are, and that we can test for that. That you have to have a market, you have to have a problem to solve. It's not the other way around. And the other thing is building a business plan. And I know that sounds like, well, yeah, because everybody does that, but no, nobody does this. And when I say build a business plan, I don't mean the top down saying, okay, well, I think we're going to sell $10 million worth of product in year 2. And you're going, 1, that'll never happen, so let's just calm down. And 2, that's the side that is going to be difficult for you to determine, and that's what you determine by talking to the potential customers, doing the market research up front, knowing how big the market is. But in order to do that, in order to actually build that business, what does it take? I mean, what kind of money are you going to have to spend, and what are you going to have to spend it on in order to get to the point that you're trying to get to, and whether that's break even or whether I personally think you should always shoot for break even, because then that should tell you, okay, the product is viable. I mean, but we very seldom see that, and we typically have to build a business plan, and it's just it's just day to day, and it's cash. I mean, it's cash. I mean, and that's, you have to do it. You have to do it if you bootstrap, because this is the way you think. Because if I only have $100,000 in the bank, well, that's all I got. And so I've got to get where I want to go, and that's the money I have, and I've got to be very, very careful with it. I think one of the problems when people raise money is they lose sight of that, and it's sort of loosey-goosey all the time, and they imagine, oh, well, life's good. I raised $20 million. I've got a runway of a couple of years. I don't have to worry about this stuff. But that's got a whole different set of problems. I mean, typically you could put them under the heading of down rounds. And that's where you lose your business ultimately. That's where the businesses are lost to the entrepreneur.
There's and great sort of things. One is that the research, make sure that you're solving a problem, and you're not just kind of like creating a solution that's looking for a problem to solve. So get it the right way around. And then the second one is make sure you have a business plan, not some sort of like and a solid business plan that's worked from the ground up, not from the top down, not based on some aspirational sort of goals, but something that's based in reality about what is achievable, but shoots for break even, because at a minimum, because that's where reality sits.
No, exactly. But we still see a lot of people that come in and say, okay, well, I allocated 10% to marketing, and I allocated 20% to engineering, and it's like, no, this won't work. This is dumb. This isn't the way it works. And I think that they have in their heads in the beginning, we're going to raise $10 million, and that's as far as they've gone. Very, very shallow. So
amidst all of that experience, Carey, I mean, do you have like one or two examples of things that you founders and ventures that you've kind of worked with that you think, actually, here's what they did, and they did it the right kind of way, and like good sort of like successes, or they listened?
I think I can think of one.
Okay.
But I don't even know, and I say that's probably stretching it, to be honest with you. Because they actually, I mean, in this particular case, we were actually their first investor and worked with them very closely for a long time, and they fought it continually. But I think that we've been invested in them, and it's actually a food company. They have they've succeeded. I mean, they outgrew their initial plant facility. They just moved into another one. They just started they have a new product. They've got thousands and thousands of stores carrying their product. They've got a very interesting story, and in terms of their personal histories and how they came up with this, so that makes it easy. But even there, it's a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle, and this. I told somebody this the other day, and I guess I've told you this not too long ago here, but it's a lot harder than it looks to do this right. This is not an easy way to go about things, starting businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you do it right and you hit all your marks, you can financially, you can do quite well. And you can also build a life, I think, where you can do a lot of good for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But the chances of doing that are long. I mean, the odds are against you, and you can shorten the odds by doing these various things that we talk about doing. It makes it more likely that you're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's just work. I mean, it is work.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, sometimes I wonder why I'm doing this, but I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think there's lessons there for, as you say, for founders, because I know that I speak to lots of different sort of people in the whole sort of service and experience sort of space that are either producing new tech or doing interesting things, and sometimes they're leading their own kind of businesses, and sometimes I also speak to kind of leaders that are leading divisions and trying to improve their service and experience, and it feels to me that the biggest lesson for me out of our conversations going back to 2014, but also kind of your experience, kind of more recent experience with unorthodox ventures and things, feels like, in short, it's almost like get out from behind your laptop.
Oh yeah, no, agreed.
And go on and kind of like and be out in the world and see how your employees kind of like work and how you can help them, your customers kind of like what they want and what they need and what they desire, because it will tell you so much more than any piece of data in a spreadsheet or a data visualization or a dashboard or anything else. And sometimes I feel that we end up getting ensconced in this digital kind of like realm, which is important, but we also remember that the world exists outside of our laptops and everything else. And that's where we get the real sort of insight and the real value that can help us actually deliver the things that we want to deliver and solve the problems.
No, and I think that, and I hate to say this because I started my first business when I was like 28, which I might have been long in the tooth. I mean, who knows? But the thing about being older and getting experience, there's something to be said for that, because the people that we see that are the most successful and can repeat that success are people that, for example, worked with a company, a device company or whatever sort of company it is, for a number of years. They understand the market, they understand who's doing what, they understand who's interested in and on the acquisition side, who might be an acquirer. I mean, they understand this, they know this space.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're starting out right out of school or out of just one job, you've got to learn all of that. You've got to figure all of that stuff out, and it takes a lot longer. I mean, it would have been better for me if I had worked in one space for an extended period of time so that I had a much better feel of what I was doing. Additionally, if I'd been thinking about starting a company, I would have paid a lot more attention to what was going on in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what you know. But if you don't know the space and you don't know the all of the problems with the existent product, and you don't understand the market size, it's hard. It takes a long time. It takes a long. So part of me, even though part of me is like, when you're young, one of the advantages of being young, at least it was for me, was I was completely ignorant, and so I could do. I had no fear of anything. I mean, you have zero. What the hell? I mean, I'm just going to do this because I can do it. I know I can do it, and you don't have any kids. You don't have. I mean, you have no obligations, and that's the time to do it, because later in life it gets harder and harder to do this thing. But the advantage of waiting a little bit, and it would have been for me as well, is that you learn so much more. If you've got this desire to chart your own course, you're always going to have it, and you just need to focus that. You just need to have a plan.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
And it makes me think about so another friend of the podcast and somebody I would call a friend is Richard Hammond, who, along with Rocky Howard, established a new company called Uncrowd. But Richard is a retailer, man and boy, has been his whole life, has written books about it and all that. He knows retail back to front, and they started this new sort of analytics kind of company that are tearing up a strip with some of the big brands because of the way that they're approaching it. So it's not surveys, analytics, that perspective. It's almost like modeling and predictive sort of like stuff to help people really understand how people engage with their experience. And if they do something, then what's the payoff for this, that, and how does it compare against their peers and all these different things. And it's just like, some of their clients don't talk about them because they don't want to talk about them because they're like their secret weapon, which is like a nice problem to have, but not brilliant for marketing. But it's, they're applying their fur, but like Richard's coming at it from that heavily imbued in that sort of that whole space and just understands it. You could slice him through and it would be retail sort of like
right
tattooed inside his body. So I completely understand that level of sort of knowledge and intuition and things really helps.
Well, and it's the history. I mean, that's the piece that you absorb when you're in a specific industrial space or retail space, is the history. You know how everything came down. You know who's doing what and what they're interested in and what makes sense and what makes no sense at all. And you have an idea of how, if you're thinking about it, then you understand the problem and you can solve the problem. And I'm sure that's when he looks at it, he sees everything. It's holistic. He sees the whole thing. It's very easy. It's very simple to him. And so he can say, yes, I can solve this problem. I know how much the solution to that problem is worth, and I can do that.
So tell me, what's the future hold for Unorthodox Ventures? Are you going to go deep on medical? Is that the plan? Because that's where you've kind of gone to, or do you still have kind of like an open?
Yeah, I would say that one part of the company is very much into medical, but by the same token, it's a company and it's business. And when you're doing something like that, if you're completely focused, there's advantages and there are disadvantages. And the advantage is that you develop the skills and the ability to do a better job. I mean, you have an absolute, or you're gunning for an absolute advantage, not just a competitive advantage. By the same token, we are not we don't feel like we know enough to exclude anything.
Right.
And so it's interesting. We just got back from a trip, or I just got back from a trip, and I talked to an individual, talked to a company that I found fascinating, just the way that they were doing the business. I mean, just their business model. And it gave me some ideas about another way to approach not the medical device problem necessarily, but the problems in other areas conceivably.
Okay.
But I think that we're always looking. I mean, I think you've got to, and again, that can be a weakness, I suppose, because you're not monomaniacally focused on one thing. But on the other hand, it keeps it interesting, and there's so much to learn. It's just crazy, crazy. I'm very, very, very lucky that I had this opportunity, I think, because it's just I love looking at new and different things. I love thinking about things from another perspective. And even people, I'll tell you the most interesting thing this last week. This guy, we were talking to this fellow, and he's saying what I thought initially. He said, well, Carey, here's what I do. I'm not doing science. I'm not going to try to look at a problem and invent a completely different way of doing that. What I do is I understand the space. I understand all of and this is medical devices.
Mm-hmm.
I understand all of the solutions to these problems and who's doing that and how they're doing it from an engineering side and from a acquisition side, a marketing side. And he says, I pick those followers because they get focused on building their business. They're not focused so much on improving their devices. And so that's all he focuses on. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, that's not the way I think about things. I think about things, let's shift the paradigm, let's shake this whole thing up. But the more that I listen to him, I'm going, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, is this the way? I mean, there's lots of ways to approach business, but his way is a very interesting way too. And I'm not saying that you go, oh, well, that I just changed everything, throw it all out, I'm going to do it in a different way. But no, it's like, okay, that's fascinating that somebody's doing it in a totally different way than I would even think about it. And so I went, just talking to him, I went from this, you're crazy, to, oh my God, I didn't think about it that way. And it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
But again, that's kind of it highlights the value of going and talking to people and being open to things. And it doesn't matter kind of who they are.
No, and exactly right. And it has to be the entrepreneur. You can't just send your minions out doing this because you don't ever learn anything that way. And if you don't know it, I think that's a big deal.
No, absolutely. I think it's a big deal. It's like you've got to get out there and be in the world and to understand how you and what you're building engages with it and how people perceive it and so on and so forth. Because that's probably one of the most crucial bits of information you could ever find. But Carey, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I'm sort of conscious of time. I'll ask you a couple of questions just to sort of wrap up and sort of like, unless there's anything that you like to highlight or add that we've missed out.
I think you've touched on a lot of really good points. So
okay. So what I wanted to do is just like zoom out a little bit and reflect on the idea that we've had a couple of 3, 4 maybe sort of like odd years, in the recent past, and I wanted to ask you is like, it's been a challenge for many people, but many people have sort of really learned a lot of stuff or have changed the way they've worked in the last kind of couple of years. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned over the last couple of years that are going to inform how you do things going forward?
that you should always try to take advantage of crisis. That's one thing. Um, Also, that people in a lot of the media have a herd mentality, and you really do have to get beyond that. I mean, you have to. It's very attractive, I think, for people to think. I mean, to be a part of a herd. I mean, at least initially, it's attractive. Um, but you can't do that. I mean, I would say it doesn't. I would have to think really hard about if that's changed, if that's changed us at all, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. I mean, I can't really. I mean, it on some things, it's amazing. It's amazing. The herd mentality is very interesting. It makes you recognize that the people, if you're not dealing with direct to consumer, that the people, I mean, it's sort of a wheat and chaff situation, because they're people you're never going to ever be able. I mean, I know they buy things and I know you sell things to them, but to try to figure out how that side of the human race thinks, it's weird to me anyway. I'm not, I mean, some people, I'm sure they got it, they know exactly what everybody's doing, but it's sort of in my mind, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a herd type of guy. I have a hard time with that. And
Well, with a title like Chief Contrarian, then it's pretty obvious that you're not a herd sort of guy.
well, yeah, but I don't mean to be, that to sound wrong, but I mean, with us, we didn't change anything. I mean, we stayed out, I think, 2 weeks in the beginning because everybody was going crazy and nobody knows what's going on, and stay away from the office. And then you look at it and you go, we can't work this way. I mean, we're a very collaborative group of people.
Uh-huh.
And so we went back, and we've been back ever since. So from that perspective, I don't think it changed. From the perspective of the larger market, I mean, the whole reaction to COVID, the government's reaction to it basically forced, I think, it tightened the market in terms of the cost of money,
Mm-hmm.
and that affects people that we speak with because it drives down valuations. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's not a bad thing, because prior to that, the valuation, some of these are crazy, just crazy things. And these funds were investing because it's not their money. I mean, it's one of those things. You have people investing money in silly ideas, and people with the silly ideas going, holy cow, look at this. I've got all this money. And they spend it, and nobody's thinking about anything. So it's very disingenuous approach to business. So I think that sort of settles out. And from our perspective, it gets better, because the more intelligence that, I mean, some of these things are crazy. They're crazy. I mean, the whole Elizabeth Holmes thing. I mean, that's insanity. If you're an engineer, you look at that and go, you're insane. This is stupid. This doesn't make sense. But I understand why people did it, because they don't know anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
because they're following the herd, and because there are people on the other side, the finance guys, going, these guys are going to rush into this. I can put money into it, hype it, and then dump it. And I mean, it's not an honest way of doing business. But that's the way a lot of people do business, or some people do business.
Yeah,
Especially
no.
financial types.
Yeah, no, the Elizabeth Holmes thing is a great example.
There's lots of them.
There is lots of them.
Just her, and you see them all the time. Crazy stuff. But a lot of it is because the people investing, especially if it's an engineered product, they're bankers. They don't know anything. I mean, bankers know less than lawyers, if you can believe that. It's true.
But I think what's interesting is that you're taking a very much more an operator led approach to things, which
Yeah.
gives you kind of like an edge. And so I think that's interesting. But it's interesting to hear you reflect on what you'd like to do, like founders to do, kind of more of, and things to be able to to build their business. But if I just ask you to sort of like just to we've rummaged around a few things, but and to draw on your experience and say, well, if actually, what would be your best advice to someone listening in that wants to improve their customer service or their customer experience? Let's say, what would you say?
I say call them on the telephone. I mean, that's really
Fine. That's fine.
I'm
Drop
sorry,
the
it's
mic.
not profound, but or go visit them. I mean, if you've got the opportunity, is visit them and understand how they're using the product. Because I mean, you can sell a product to somebody, and the sales may go up for a while, but it doesn't mean that they're actually using the product. I mean, it'll collapse if that happens. But if you get a product in front of a customer and you see how they use it, and you understand this is I didn't realize this, but these are the real advantages of my product. But then there's all of these disadvantages. I mean, it can be the smallest thing. I mean, you're trying to make it from my point of view, you're trying to make the customer, you want it to be slick. You want it to be, there's no problem with this. I don't have to go outside and get somebody to do anything for me. I don't have to go to the store, the hardware store, or any place else to buy a tool to put this together. Everything is there. And because everything that the experience of the customer is based on things that you may think are silly. I mean, it may be that you don't have the wrench you need to put the product together. Now you've got to go and find the wrench and do this. I mean, that's a pain. Or you can't put the product together. You can't assemble it. You need to get somebody on the outside. And so though you receive the product on Monday, you can't put it together for another 3 weeks because, I mean, everything should be slick as glass. And so that when the customer is thinking about you, they're thinking, yes, that was good. And I don't know that every customer is like this, but I think a lot of customers are like, they were thinking about me. When they did this, they were thinking about me. I'm important to the producer. I'm important to them. That's why they do these things for me. And it may not be every single time that happens, but I'll tell you, my favorite bad experience is the whole when you buy a tool or you buy it's typically tools in my experience, and they have that packaging on it, that hard, and it's like, what the hell is this? I know
the one that's
yes.
been heat sealed.
Yeah, and I understand it, but it's like, you don't care about me. This is the biggest. You can't possibly not know that this is the bane of so many people's existence, because no matter what you do, I mean, you're going to get poked. I mean, you can't, it's just not easy. And so the experience is horrible.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a presentation that I use, and I use I use a picture of a slide. Oh, no, a slide for a picture. Other way around, a picture on a slide, rather. And it's of a lady who is wrestling with a energy conserving kind of light bulb that's in one of those kind of like heat sealed kind of like hard plastic covering. And I show it to people and I go like, who's ever experienced that? Who's kind of ever come away from that with cut-free hands? Kind of because you've had to kind of take a big pair of heavy-duty scissors to kind of cut through it, and then it's like you end up ripping it open, then you end up cutting yourself, and I go, that's
the reason that it exists is that the manufacturer of the tool is selling it to a distributor, selling it to a retail distributor, and that's going to the customers. So there is not this path. There's not a path from the producer to it runs through, and you'll never see it. you don't really, even as the manufacturer, because a lot of the retailers, that's what you have to do. That's the way they want to see it because it's easy. But it has nothing to do with the consumer, the ultimate consumer. And the retailer just doesn't give a flying flip because it's got nothing to do with them either. And so the whole thing is, if you're selling, and again, this is one of my peeves, but selling directly to the consumer and talking to the consumer, that's a totally different experience because you're going to hear that from every single person. That's a big deal. Don't ever do that to me. And I mean, is that a market? I don't know, but that's what's hidden by going through a third party. It just is.
No, I love that. It's just because it's that those sort of things exists across a piece. And I guess from your experience going way back to kind of big ass fans, that's the sort of things that you are finding out and saying, like, actually, those are things that people remember and stand out in their minds and can be the little kind of things that cause them to think twice about buying from you again if you hadn't fixed them, sort of thing. And so that's, you look at them and just go, yeah, you should be working to find out what those things are and then to remove those barriers and then to tell people what you've done, because then it shows that, one, you're paying attention, you're doing the stuff that matters to them, and that you're actually keeping them informed and showing them that actually you're listening and you care.
And they matter. That
exactly.
Is a big deal.
They matter. So thank you for that. I love that because it's like, yeah, I use that sort of example all the time. So a couple of final questions before we kind of end. So I explained to you before we started this is that I've written a couple of punk themed books around customer experience, and I've been asking a couple of questions at the end of these podcasts just to poll some opinions about things. And the first question I wanted to ask you was, the first book that I wrote was called Punk CX, and I've been asking people what one or two words were used to describe a more punk approach to customer experience. So what would it be, Carey?
See, we're going to go, this is going to go the wrong way, because when I think of punk, I like punk, but when I think of the first punk, I think of the Sex Pistols, and then I think of the whole, you don't really have to know how to play the instrument, just make noise. And that was early punk in the way I look at it. And so to me, I'm not into that. I know what you're saying about the progressive music that preceded that, but I think that was over orchestrated an awful lot of time, which is tiresome. I mean, the Moody Blues, I mean, we get down into it here. The Moody Blues, I mean, they were, and I think you're old enough to remember the Moody Blues a long time before that, when they were kind of good, are Fleetwood Mac. Same thing, is it goes from this sort of looser vision and music. It was tight, but it was well put together, to this punk, which was like, forget all that stuff. Let's do it. Let's make noise and let's be different. Let's don't be. We're not going to try to fit into that. So I understand that, but I mean, going from, the Moody Blues had problems, but I think if you went back a couple of years from that to where they started, you can't even believe it's the same group. To this over orchestrated horse shit where they did that. Oh, and that one song where they've got they're talking, and it's like, give me a break. Give me a break. It's pretentious as it can possibly be. But see, I'm not I think structure is important, not in the structure that you impose upon yourself, because I think it again, you're showing your audience, or you're displaying to your audience that you appreciate them and you appreciate the fact that they can understand what you're trying to say to them.
So I think the thing what I would maybe suggest, and distilling out of everything that we've talked about today, and it's aligned with the whole punk sort of idea, is that thing around having real conversations, because that's what kind of punk was trying to do. It was trying to make it kind of real and visceral. And yes, it could be some of them, but some bands were really noisy and kind of a bit messy, but they were trying to bring things back to reality in a way. And actually kind of have talk about stuff that they were seeing around themselves and things that mattered, and to keep things real and to start conversations about things. And so, if I may, I'm going to kind of offer up two words that I'm going to give to you, and then you can put them on the list, which is real conversations.
Well, and I think the downside from my perspective of punk is there was no conversation going on. They were talking to themselves. And I'm sure they were happy. That's fine. But they weren't talking to an audience, in my impression. Because I think about you going in this route, like the Police. I think that was sophisticated. It wasn't over. Well, some of it got to that point, I suppose, but it was relatively straightforward and well written, and they used English and they understood the language. And I think that to me, that's an elevation. And punk, to me, punk might be it might be that you've got to cross that muddy culvert to get to the Police, but that's what punk is. Because I don't think they were talking to anybody other than themselves. And again, this is from the other side of the pond. And so when I think about it, I think about, there's the Queen, and the Sex Pistols were just like, up yours, this is the way it is. And it's like, okay, I got it, I guess. I don't know. It was strange.
Oh well, never mind. I mean, we could go into it, and we could have a conversation about the kind of the
Well, I'm sure that you know more about it than I, but that's my impressions.
That's fine. That's fair enough. But then the other kind of one that we did which was a follow up from that, which was the idea that just dealing with customer experience in and of itself is insufficient, and you actually have to take a holistic view of this, and that you have to take a experience as a multidimensional sort of thing. It's customers, employees, stakeholders, kind of community and stuff.
It's like people talk to me about culture, company culture, and all of this, and I don't. It's like they want to import it. Well, we need the culture program in here, and we're just gonna just put it right in. I always tell people that's not the way this works. You can't learn to do that. That comes, and it does, in my estimation, comes from the top, and you set the culture, maybe not consciously, but the culture of the company tells you, in my mind, what the founder or the CEO, it tells you who they are. I mean, it's the whole thing. And so you can't take something from the outside and put it in, because it won't work.
Yeah.
But if the guy on top is a knucklehead and doesn't really care about anybody other than himself and making money and that sort of thing, then you're going to get that kind of culture. It's going to be a rough culture. So
my question was like going, who do you think is going to all kind of like this? The second bit was about kind of trying to introduce or start a conversation around this thing. If people can talk about that, many companies are trying to differentiate themselves on the experience that they deliver to both their customers and their employees and things, and that's sort of part of the competitive kind of game, right? And therefore, if we talk about brand leadership, and we talk about technological leadership and market leadership and things, but if experience is the competitive game, as it were, then surely we should be talking about experience leadership. And my question then to you would be, who do you think has that sort of knitted together? Who's kind of like setting the bar? Who do you like?
And again, this may not be is Kohler, and I say that they're a plumbing. They manufacture, and they have for a long time manufactured plumbing fixtures, kitchen fixtures, bathroom fixtures. They make toilets. They do all sorts. It's a very large company out of Wisconsin, and And the reason I say that is they turned me on to thinking about customer service, because I had a problem with one of their, we built a house and we had this very expensive, because of my wife, we had this very expensive water dispenser in the kitchen, in the sink. So that, I mean, it was like super fancy. It was commercial look. It was very cool. The only problem was it didn't work. It had a problem. And the problem was over a period of time, it unscrewed itself. The sprayer piece unscrewed itself. And this is all really heavy stuff. It unscrewed itself, and you turn it on one time and bam. I mean, it was like water everywhere. And so I tried a number of things. I couldn't fix it. So I call Kohler up and I go on their website to see, well, how do I do this exactly? And so they had it all listed. I mean, is it bathroom? Is it kitchen? What is it? Is it a toilet? Is it a fixture? So yeah, that's what it is. And so I get a number, and basically I call them and I say, this is my problem. What do I do? They said, well, let us get a hold of that department. And they gave me an engineer. And this is the way it worked. They gave me an engineer, and I told him who I was, and he looks it up and he says, oh yes, Mr. Smith, you bought this in 2004, March 1, 2004. And it's terrible to hear this. This is terrible. So, and I don't know exactly what the problem is, but let's replace this for you right now. And it took no time at all. And so I got it. I installed it, and it was fine. And then I had the other one, and I can't remember if they asked me to send it back or we just pitched it. But I thought that was the best. I mean, they knew who I was, which is impressive. I know where I lived. They know when I bought it. And then they listened to the problem, and they said, well, that shouldn't be your problem. Let's take care of that. And they took care of that. And they knew, I mean, this fixture was, I don't know, $1,400. It was like stupid. This is like, what your wife has been thinking about forever. And we just had to have it. And so it's stupid expensive. But these guys, that was not what was important. What was important was that I had the fixture that worked, and it was perfect. They didn't care about getting it back, as I remember. They certainly didn't talk about it. But that was it. That's what it was. It was like wham, bam. And so then 2 weeks later, I get this thing, I put it on, and it was never a problem after that. So I always thought that and of all things, a plumbing fixture company that had this down, they understood everything. Make it super simple for the customer. Not, I mean, they didn't say, could have said, and what you would have expected, well, this was XYZ. You need to get your plumber or whoever it was, the contractor that installed this, and we need to, do all this stuff. It was nothing like that. They knew who I was. They got it back. I thought it was cool. That's awesome. The best customer experience I've ever had.
Awesome. Well, big shout out to Kohler for that. And so one final thing, Carey, is that a little addendum to these most recent episodes, that to try and, I don't know, end on a kind of a highlight, as it were, because I find myself sometimes we can look at the news and it's like doom scrolling, kind of all these things around the world. And so I've been asking people to share with me what's the most interesting or exciting or the thing that made you smile that you've seen in the last week.
It probably had to do with an animal, but
that's fine. I mean, many of them do.
Yeah. No, I think that I mean, again, this is online, but this involved a cow, of all things, a Guernsey cow, because we had in the fan company, we had markets in the ag in dairy, and cows you don't think about a cow unless you've been around cows. but they're very curious, and they're very, very friendly. And so this was somebody had a cow, and they were in a field, and there were a couple of these, but one of them they were playing music. The woman was playing the guitar, and the cow was just luxuriating in this, in that. And another one just involved petting a cow, which I thought was sort of interesting. I don't know. I think sometimes people, and I saw another one that involved a gorilla and his offspring. I mean, and the way they treated each other. And again, who knows if this, I'm assuming with the gorilla, I have no idea. I mean, what was going on there, but it looked, paternal and friendly. And with the cows, I mean, people don't think about these things, and they don't imagine that that there's a world outside of, just a bunch of people yelling at each other, which is what you see an awful lot of. So,
yeah. I mean, that's cool. I mean, I've seen a couple of things over the last kind of week. I remember seeing kind of one thing where there was a duck and a set of ducklings. They were swimming around, and they got close to this they were swimming, and they got close to this weir. Then they turned away, and then the duckling on the back end of the little group got almost like sucked over the weir.
Right.
And so they went down, and they were in the kind of splash in the pool, and they were there. And then so the mother duck was looking over and went, oh, 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 and then kind of thought about it and went, right, fine, we're all in. And they all
that's where we're going.
They're all piled over the kind of the weir, because we're not going to abandon you. We're following you. We're kind of all in. And I just thought, brilliant. That's togetherness. And I thought it was such a cool kind of story. But those little things. So I just thought I'd like to kind of finish on those random little kind of thoughts and kind of stories at the end. But thank you for that, kind of, Carey. Also, thank you for being a friend of the podcast, for coming back after 9 years. Wow, thank you. I think that's my longest redux to date, which is great. Congratulations on. Thank you once again for just sharing that story with me, because I still use it to this day. The story of Big Ass Fans and what you've done. And congratulations on the sale of the company and the transition to the Unorthodox Ventures, and for sharing with me the lessons that you've learned along the way, and the frustrations that you have with founders and what you'd wish they'd do more of. I think there's lessons in there for everybody. But yeah, thank you for that. That's been ace.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. It has been a long time. That was forever ago.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.